Chapter 6. The swarm surrounded the girls, delivering several nasty stings and forcing them toward the boy, who had hopped down from his throne and was now guiding them all deeper into the forest. "Where are you taking us?" Sabrina asked, but he just laughed. Soon they came to the edge of the forest where a tall fence blocked their way. Built into the fence was a gate, and the boy pushed it open. The girls stopped through and found themselves in front of a tarp-covered swimming pool in the backyard of a 2-story suburban-style house. Some of the lights swirled around the tarp and lifted it off the pool, while others zipped off and returned with a rope. They stung Sabrina's arms relentlessly until she put them behind her back, and then they tied her wrists together. The boy stuck the tip of his sword into Sabrina's back and forced her onto the diving board. "You've made a terrible mistake, spy," he shouted. "We're not spies," Daphne exclaimed. "Tell it to the fish," the boy hollered, causing the pixies to make a tittering noise that sounded like laughter. Sabrina looked down into the pool and wondered how deep the water might be. There was a diving board, so she guessed it was deep, and with her arms tied behind her back, she'd certainly drown if the icy water didn't freeze her to death first. She had to get free. She tugged at her wrists, but each pull just tightened the rope. "So, spy, would you like to repent your crimes before you meet your watery doom?" the boy asked. "What crime?" Sabrina cried, and then took a deep breath, certain he would push her in. But after several moments, nothing happened. "The crime of stealing the old lady away from me," the mop-topped boy declared. "Granny?" Daphne asked. The one they call Relda Grimm. Relda Grimm is our grandmother, and we're not trying to steal her. We're trying to save her," Sabrina shouted. "Save her?" the boy asked suspiciously. "Save her from what?" "A giant," the two girls called out together. Sabrina could sense their captor's confusion. She turned her head and saw him talking to several of the pixies that hovered nearby. "Well, of course it makes a difference," the boy replied, annoyed. "We're trying to get home. We need to save her before it's too late," Daphne pleaded. The boy groaned and shook his head in disgust at the pixies. He reluctantly began to untie Sabrina's wrists. "Where did this happen?" he asked as he worked. "How big was the giant?" Sabrina didn't answer. Instead, as soon as she was free, she spun around, grabbed the boy by the shoulders, and heaved him into the pool, sending a splash of water and soggy dead leaves high into the air. The sword slipped from his hand as he fell, and with nimble fingers, Sabrina caught it. She leaped to safety and waved the sword threateningly at the pixies. "You're going to let us go," she demanded. There was no movement at first, but then the pixies flew around the pool, making the same laughing sound as before, as if they were chuckling at their leader's misfortune. The girls stood dumbfounded, unsure of what to do next, when a geyser of water shot high into the air with the thoroughly soaked boy riding its crest. When the water crashed back into the pool, the boy stayed aloft, held there by the powerful beating of the 2 huge wings on his back. Oddly enough, the boy was laughing. "You think this is funny?" Sabrina exploded. She jabbed at the boy with his own sword, but he flew effortlessly away from each thrust. "You and your flying cockroaches kidnap girls and threaten to kill them. That's how you losers have fun?" "Oh, we wouldn't have killed you. We were just fooling," the boy said. "It was mean," Daphne said. The boy shrugged. "Some people can't take a joke." "Well, if you're finished with your stupid, psychotic games, my sister and I have to rescue our grandmother," Sabrina declared. She took Daphne's hand and turned to leave. Elvis joined them, but Sabrina shot him an angry look. The dog had spent the entire episode sitting lazily by the pool as if nothing peculiar were happening. The Great Dane caught her eye and whined. "You've been in this town for less than 2 days, and you've already lost the old lady," the boy said bitterly. as he floated down into their path. We didn't lose her, Sabrina replied. She was taken by a monster as big as a mountain. Well, if you've come looking for help, you're talking to the wrong person, the boy declared. Rescuing old ladies is a job for a hero. I'm a villain. Good to know. We weren't going to ask anyway, Sabrina said angrily, tossing the boy's sword aside. I thought that Peter Pan was one of the good guys, Daphne asked. The boy's face turned so red Sabrina thought his head might explode. Peter Pan? I'm not Peter Pan. I'm Puck. Who's Puck? Daphne asked. Who's Puck? The boy cried. I'm the most famous ever after in this town. My exploits are known around the world. I've never heard of you, Sabrina said. She spun around and started walking through the yard to the road, with her sister and Elvis following. After only a few steps, the boy was hovering in front of them again. You've never heard of the Trickster King? Puck asked, shocked. The girls shook their heads. The Prince of Fairies? Robin Goodfellow, the imp? Do you work for Santa? Daphne asked. I'm a fairy, not an elf, Puck roared. You really don't know who I am. Doesn't anyone read the classics anymore? Dozens of writers have warned the world about me. I'm the most famous of all of William Shakespeare's plays. I don't remember any Puck and Romeo and Juliet, Sabrina muttered, feeling a little amused at how the boy was reacting to his non-celebrity. Besides Romeo and Juliet, Puck shouted, I'm the star of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Congratulations, Sabrina said flatly. Never read it. Puck floated down to the ground. His wings disappeared, and he spun around on his heel, transforming into a big, shaggy dog. Elvis growled at the sight of him, but Puck didn't attack. Instead, he shook himself all over, spraying the girls with water. When he was finished, he morphed back into a boy. The old lady is a goner, Puck taunted. You'll get no help from me. Like I said, I'm a bad guy. Yeah, you told us, Sabrina said as she wiped her face. I really can't help, he said. Fine. You sent those pixies to attack us last night, didn't you? That wasn't very nice. Daphne gave him her very best angry look. I'm a lot of things, but nice isn't one of them, the boy said. The girls turned their backs on Puck and marched off down the road. When they were out of his earshot, Daphne tugged on Sabrina's arms. Maybe we should team up with him. He could fly over the forest and spot the giant, she suggested. You saw what a lunatic he is. I don't want to ruin whatever slim chance we might have, Sabrina replied. We're better off on our own. The path to the front door of Granny Relda's cottage seemed like a walk up a mountain, and by the time they arrived at the house, Sabrina was nearly asleep standing up. She took out Granny's key ring and felt the weight of 100 keys jingling in her hand, each singing a different mystery. There were a lot of locks on the front door, but not enough for each of these keys. Where were the doors the rest of them unlocked? It seemed like hours before Sabrina finally turned the last deadbolt on the door. Elvis was asleep and drooling on the path, his thick legs kicking back and forth as he dreamed. Daphne lay beside him, using his big belly as a pillow. That's all of them. She twisted a knob and leaned into the door. Unfortunately, it didn't open. It didn't swing open. In fact, it didn't budge at all. It's jammed. Daphne got up and walked over. Are you sure you unlocked them all? She asked. Sabrina fumed. If she knew anything, it was how to unlock a door. They'd escaped a dozen foster homes in the last year and a half. Locks were not her problem. She took the cool doorknob in her hand and turned it once more, proving that she had unlocked it. You're going to save the old lady from a giant? You can't even open a door, a familiar voice commented. Puck floated to the ground, his huge wings disappearing just as he landed. What do you want? Sabrina demanded. If you want to get inside, you have to tell the house you're home, he said. Of course. Daphne knocked on the door 3 times. "We're home," she said, repeating the same words the girls heard Granny Relda say each time they entered the home, while turning the doorknob. The door finally swung open. "How did you know that?" Daphne asked Puck. "The old lady and I are very close. She tells me everything." Elvis immediately leaped to his feet and trotted into the house, nearly knocking over the girls on his way to the kitchen. Sabrina and Daphne stepped inside, but when Puck pushed his way in, they tried to close the door in his face. "We're not supposed to let anyone in here," Sabrina said suddenly, thankful for Granny's odd rules. Puck spun around, morphed into a mouse, and skittered into the room before they could stop him. A moment later, he was back to his normal form and tossing himself onto Granny's fluffy recliner. "Now, I know I'm one of the bad guys, as you two will have to keep this to yourselves," the boy said. "I do have a reputation as the worst of the worst. If word got out that the Trickster King was helping the heroes, well, it would be scandalous. But the old lady does provide me with a meal from time to time. Not that I feel any loyalty, but if she were to get eaten by a giant, my free lunches would disappear. So I did a flyby all the way up into the mountains. I found some tracks, but no giant. I sent some pixies to keep searching without me. The whole thing was exhausting. The two of you should get started." "Started doing what?" Sabrina cried. "First, I want you to prepare me a hearty meal so that I have plenty of energy to kill the giant," Puck instructed the girls. Sabrina groaned. "You've got to be kidding." "The old lady always makes lunch when a mystery is afoot. I know it's not the most glamorous work, but I think you two are best suited for domestic tasks." "What does domestic tasks mean?" Daphne asked. The girls stared at Puck, waiting for an answer. "You know, women's work," he said, only to be shouted down by the angry sisters. "Well, I can't be expected to do everything. Being your leader is going to take all of my energy." "Leader? No one made you leader. No one even said they wanted your help." "You may not want it, but you need it," the boy shouted back. "The two of you can't even get into your own house. Do you think you'll strike fear into a giant?" "Maybe if you two keep shouting, the giant will come to us," Daphne said. Sabrina and Puck stared angrily at each other for a long moment. "Who's hungry?" Daphne said. "I'm going to do some domestic tasks for myself." Sabrina was too hungry to fight any longer. Eating would clear her head. The 3 children raided the refrigerator and dug through the bread box, grabbing anything and everything they could get their hands on. Puck seemed to share Daphne's big appetite. Both of their plates were heaped with odd-colored food. The two also ate the same way, like hungry pigs, grunting happily as they gobbled up their meals. They were working on seconds by the time Sabrina finished a Swiss cheese sandwich and found what she hoped was just a weirdly colored pear. "So, what's with the hat?" Daphne asked, pointing to Puck's golden crown. "It's a crown," Puck huffed. "I'm the prince of the fairies, emperor of pixies, brownies, hobgoblins, elves, and gnomes, king of tricksters and prank players, spiritual leader to juvenile delinquents, layabouts, and bad apples." The little girl stared at the boy with confusion in her face. "I'm royalty," Puck declared. "So where's your kingdom?" Sabrina asked snidely. "You're in it," he snapped. "The forest and the trees are my kingdom. I sleep under the stars. The sky is my royal blanket." "That explains the smell," Sabrina muttered. The Trickster King ignored her comment and munched hungrily, tossing apple cores and whatever else he couldn't eat onto the floor. A turkey bone soared from his hand and landed on a nearby windowsill. "Puck, can I ask you a question?" Daphne said. "You bet." "If you knew Shakespeare, why do you look like you're only 11 years old?" This was something Sabrina had wondered as well. Granny's explanation that magic kept the ever-afters alive didn't totally make sense. If Mayor Charming and Mr. Seven were the same people from the stories, they had to be hundreds of years old, yet they looked as if they were no older than her dad. Ah, that's the upside of being an ever after, Puck said. You only get as old as you want to be. Some decided to age a little so that they could get jobs and dumb stuff like that. Then why didn't you? Sabrina asked. Puck shrugged. Never crossed my mind. I plan on staying a boy until the sun burns out. Sabrina thought that she'd like to see him running around in the dark as the earth froze over. She bit into her sandwich only to discover that the Swiss cheese tasted more like hard applesauce. So tell me what happened with the giant, said Puck. While Sabrina ate, Daphne told the boy the whole sordid story. She told him about the crashed farmhouse that was stepped on by a giant's foot and how Mayor Charming demanded that Granny Relda give up her detective work. How the farmer spoke to a man named Mr. Englishman and how a witch erased the memory of the entire event. She told about the gang of thugs that attacked them outside the hospital and how when they followed the gang back to their hideout, they spotted Charming again. Then she told him about the giant's attack and how he snatched up Granny and Mr. Canis. While Daphne told the story, Sabrina wandered into the living room and stood in front of one of the many bookshelves. Books on giants, where would they be? She said to herself. Puck and Daphne eventually joined her, and together they scanned the bookcases. There's got to be something here that can help us with that monster, Sabrina said after many minutes of searching. Look, Daphne said, pointing at a row of old books. Instead of guides to giants, Sabrina saw their family name repeated in each title. She took one down and read the whole title. Fairy Tale Accounts, 1942 to 1965, by Edwin Alvin Grimm. It's a journal, Sabrina said, flipping through it to find pages and pages of handwritten notes going back decades. There's one here for everyone in our family. I guess, including this one, said Daphne as she pulled another one from the shelf and handed it to her sister. Sabrina almost dropped it when she saw the title, Fairy Tale Accounts by Henry Grimm. She opened it and recognized her dad's neat handwriting right away. She traced his hand's movement along the lines and circles of each word. She turned more pages, feeling more of his presence. Not bothering to read, she just taking comfort in knowing that he had once held the book. Let me see, Daphne said. You're wasting your time with those stupid books. I'm the smartest person I know, and I've never read a book in my life. We should all be out looking, Puck said. If you want to go, there's nothing keeping you here, Sabrina said as she led her sister back into the kitchen. She laid the journal down on the table and the two girls hovered over it together. They flipped to the first page. A color photograph of Mayor Charming, dressed in royal robes, stared back at them. He wore a sapphire and diamond crown and a dazzling ruby ring on each finger. He smiled smugly, as if he thought very highly of himself. Elvis sauntered into the room and licked Sabrina's hand. He spied Charming's picture and growled. Don't worry, Elvis, he can't get us now, Daphne said. Sabrina read aloud what her father had written. July. Another run-in with Charming. Mom and Dad discovered that he was attempting to buy 1,000 acres of land known as Old MacDonald's Farm on the eastern border of the town. Where he got the money for such a big purchase came into question, and Dad, of course, accused him of using his witches to conjure up phony cash. Charming huffed and demanded an apology. When Dad refused, the two of them got into a fist fight. Dad has one heck of a left hook. Kapow! But the biggest surprise was Charming's freak out. He swore he'd turn Fairyport Landing into his new kingdom, and he said he looked forward to the day when he could personally drive a bulldozer through our house. He's rebuilding his kingdom, Sabrina said as she turned to the pages. It's all here. Listen to this. December. Charming lost the most when he moved to America. He was forced to sell his castle, his horses, everything he owned. To make it worse, one of his 3 ships, Wilhelm hired for the Atlantic crossing was used primarily to haul Charming's enormous fortune, and it sunk when it hit a sandbar off the coast of Maryland. When he got to Ferryport Landing, changed from Ferryport Landing in 1910, he blew what was left on one bad investment after another. A failed diamond mine partnership with the dwarfs, a wholesale carpet company poorly managed by his business partner Alibaba, and a laser disc player factory that went belly up. Being mayor doesn't pay much, and Dad believes Charming runs a bunch of financial scams, both illegal and magical, just to keep the electricity on at the mansion. That was until he came up with his greatest scheme yet, the Ferryport Landing fundraising ball. Once a year, Charming invites the ever-after community to the mansion, and every year they throw money at him, trying to win his support for whatever political cause they have. The money obviously goes straight into the prince's pocket. I'd let anything that Charming is hoarding most of it, he can buy up the whole town. But what's that got to do with giants? And if he wanted to buy the farm, why did he send Mr. Englishman to do the work? Daphne asked. I believe that Mr. Englishman is Mayor Charming, are the same person. Charming does have an English accent. He could have worn a disguise so Mr. Appleby wouldn't recognize him as the mayor, Sabrina said. I bet you're right, her sister said. But still, why let a giant loose? I don't get it. In the old days, giants and people used to work together all the time, Puck said, stealing the purple pear from Sabrina's plate and chomping on it. They did? Oh, yeah. Folks used to hire them to take care of problems they couldn't handle themselves. From what I hear, you can pretty much talk them into doing anything, the boy said. Giants are pretty dumb. He's right. Daphne was poring over a large book she'd come across while Sabrina was reading. It was entitled Anatomy of a Giant. I don't know what this word is, she said. How is it spelled? Alliances. It's alliances. It means to team up or join a group, Sabrina exclaimed. It says that in olden days, people used to form all alliances. Alliances with giants to destroy their enemies. Charming's using the giant to scare off people off their land. Anyone who won't sell gets squashed, Sabrina cried. But why have Glinda erase Mr. Appleby's mind? Daphne asked. What do you mean? Why would he want the farmer to forget to be afraid? And don't forget the lens cap, Daphne said. Why would he want to videotape it? You're right, it doesn't make sense. I don't think I'd want any proof of what I'd done if it were me, Sabrina said. There's more, her sister said, looking down at the big book. It also says that rarely did these alliances, it says they usually backfired. In most cases, the human was eaten by the giant or dragged off to the giant kingdom to be a slave. There's a story here about a giant kidnapping a princess for an evil baron, and before the baron could collect a ransom from her family, the giant ate her, Daphne said quietly. That's hilarious, Puck said. Sabrina and Daphne gave him a disgusted look. It says the townspeople use hound dogs to track down the giant because giants have a strong smell, Daphne continued. When they caught him, he nearly killed the entire town before they could bring him down. The girls spent a moment looking at each other worried, with one of the other's worried eyes. What if the giant had eaten Granny and Mr. Canis? What if he was eating them as they were wasting time doing research? It says when giants get out of hand, the townspeople sent a hero to kill the giant for them, Daphne read. His name was Jack, and in his prime, he killed between 10 and 20 giants, stole treasure from the giant kingdom, and was world famous. Sabrina turned her attention back to her father's journal. She flipped through more of its pages until she found an envelope stuffed inside. Look at this, she said. It says, to Sabrina, Daphne, and Puck from Granny Relda. See, I told you I knew her, Puck cried. Open it, Daphne begged. Sabrina tore open the envelope and began to read the letter inside. Lieblings, if you're reading this, then one of my investigations has not turned out the way I hoped. I don't want you to worry, as I can take care of myself, and I know a little kung fu. If for some reason there is an emergency, you should take my keys and go to the room you have been forbidden to enter. All the answers you need will be staring you in the face. Love, your Oma. P.S. Don't give Elvis any sausage. It makes him gassy. She wants us to go into the room, Puck said in amazement. I've been trying to get in there since the day she told me it was off limits. Staring us in the face? What does that mean? Sabrina said. But before she knew it, her little sister was halfway up the stairs with the key ring in her hand. Wait, Sabrina shouted, taking the stairs 2 at a time. By the time she got to the top, Daphne was already trying keys. Puck flew up the stairs and snatched the tiny ring out of Daphne's hands. Royalty first, peasant. She gave the keys to us, Sabrina snapped, snatching them from him. A set of keys you have no idea how to use, Puck shouted, taking them back. Hand them over, Stinky, shouted Sabrina. No. Don't make me do something you're going to regret. I've fought tougher guys than you, Grimm, though most of them had better smelling breath. Knock off that racket right now, a voice suddenly boomed from behind the door. It startled them all so much that they fell backward onto the floor. Did you just hear that? Daphne whispered. Everyone heard that, Sabrina and Puck replied. Maybe it's the sheriff. Maybe he got into the house somehow, Daphne said. Hampstead would have just come down and grabbed us, her sister replied. Besides, Elvis isn't freaking out. Then who is it? Puck asked. Granny locks this door for a reason. If someone's in that room, she doesn't want them going anywhere. They might be dangerous, Sabrina warned. I'm not afraid, the boy cried, puffing up his chest. I have an idea, Daphne said. She took Puck's and Sabrina's hands and led them back down the stairs and into the kitchen. Within minutes, the girls and Puck were standing outside the door again, each wearing a metal spaghetti strainer as a helmet. Daphne wore an ancient washing board on her chest and had duct-taped huge metal spoons to each kneecap as protection from unfair kicks. She held a frying pan as her weapon. Sabrina wore a pressure cooker lid on her behind and held a wok pan for a shield. She swung a rolling pin in the air, preparing to whack whoever might be on the other side of the door. Puck held his trusty sword in one hand and a carrot peeler in the other. He'd found a couple of cookie pans to tape to his chest and back, and his feet were encased in oven mitts. Sabrina bent down to insert what she thought was the right key, and her armor clanged and knocked around, causing a tremendous racket. She realized that a sneak attack was probably no longer realistic. When they turned in the lock, she straightened up and looked back at the others. Elvis stood behind Daphne and Puck with an odd, confused expression on his face. We should send the dog in first, Sabrina said. Good idea, Daphne replied. Sabrina said to the Great Dane, Elvis, go get him. Elvis sat down on hind legs and used his back paw to scratch his neck. If he understood the order, he wasn't letting go. Discouraged, Sabrina said to her sister and Puck, we'll go in together. Whoever is in there better leave, because we're armed to the teeth. I wouldn't want to be you when we find you, Puck shouted. Just stay together and most of all, stay calm, Sabrina said. If we don't panic, we can take this guy ourselves. On 3, Daphne whispered, giving her frying pan a practice swing. 1, 2, 3, Sabrina screamed. shoving open the door and rushing into the room with the others at her back. The trio swung their weapons frantically, slashing at whatever enemy dared to face their deadly kitchen utensils. After several moments and 0 hits, Sabrina stopped and looked around the room. In the moonlight, from the room's only window, she could see it was empty except for a wood-framed, full-length mirror that hung on a wall. "Where did he go?" Daphne said as he peered behind the door and found no one. "He ran off, 'cause he's smart," Puck crowed. "He knew we'd skin him alive." Sabrina frowned. "Then we may have run off our only chance of saving Granny and Mr. Canis. There's nothing in here that's going to help us." She turned to leave, but Daphne said, "Granny's note said that all the answers we need was stare us in the face." She pointed at the mirror. "It's just a mirror," her sister argued. "It can't hurt to take a look," Puck said, and trotted over to it. Sabrina followed Daphne, and together they studied their reflections. "I think I see something," Puck said. "What? What is it?" Sabrina said. "A booger. It's in your nose." The boy laughed so hard he snorted. But then he saw Sabrina staring and stopped abruptly. "Who are you?" a loud voice suddenly bellowed from within the mirror. Sabrina looked into it and felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. A face was staring out at her, but it was not her own. Floating without a body, the face was that of a man with a bald head and thick, angular features. He stared at the children with rage, his eyes like blue flames. Terrified, the children ran back toward the exit, but a blue ray shot from the mirror, hit the door, and slammed it shut, trapping them inside. "Who are you?" the head bellowed. "Tell me now, or I will kill you where you stand."